a very, very warm welcome to, all the participants. And thank you so much for joining the first of a series of seminars and rather webinars, which the Grant Thornton Not-for-Profit and CSR Advisory Group has started. And over the next couple of months, we will be rolling out many such webinars on, topics of interest. The first one, the one which we are holding or hosting today is basically CSR response to COVID-19, immediate initiation and future course. So really speaking, it's really been a tough 3 months, I think, for all of us. And if I actually recall and I listen back and I introspect, I think change in capital letters is really been the mantra. There has been a lot of change for all of us. And I think going forward as well, we can foresee many, many things actually undergoing a change. I foresee a change in impact, in lifestyle, in response to pandemics, in the way we are actually going to be treating and dealing with our communities. And I think many, many such changes, including our public health approach, is also going to undergo a drastic shift and a drastic change going forward. In this context, I feel, and many of us at Grant Thornton also feel, that it will be imperative that corporates and corporate foundations tweak and reassess their CSR programs and CSR strategies going forward. All in the ecosystem. And I think there are many such participants from the civil society, individual consultants, many corporate foundation heads, and people working in corporates, in the sustainability space. I think everybody would need to take a step back and reassess whether it is the funding strategy of NGOs, whether it is the programmatic strategy of corporates, as I mentioned. I think this is a time to reassess and relook. To know more about how corporates and corporate foundations are reacting to this change and how they are actually dealing with the COVID pandemic. To talk about this and to share their views, let me welcome a very, very eminent and diverse panel consisting of Ishtiaq Ahmed, who is the Vice President of Public Affairs, Communication and Sustainability, Coca-Cola India. Pratyush Panda, who's the Vice President and Head Corporate Social Responsibility, ACC Limited. And very happy, to have Dhruvi Shaw, who is the Vice President and Head of Programs at the Axis Bank Foundation. So welcome all, and thank you from Grant Thornton's side. And we really look forward to hearing your views on this pertinent topic. So let me start with you, Pratyush. The first question really is that if you can introduce yourself, Pratyush, briefly, give some context to the CSR programs that ACC Limited is actually conducting. And then also tell us how, as a company, ACC Limited has responded to the COVID pandemic. So Pratyush, I'd request you to take this question.
So very good afternoon, Rohit, Ahmed, Dhruvi, and all the members, those who have joined in this webinar. By this time, I'm very sincerely saying that thank you so much, all of you who have joined. You all must be working very hard by this time across all locations, and it's very different way of working today during last 2 months. We have never used to work digitally 90% and 10% physically kind of thing. There's a big challenge that has gone into all of our mind. And every day we all are trying to innovate the process so that our reach, our impact can be maximized. Coming back to my own organization, SEC Limited, at SEC, we had our own disaster management team. We started it 2013, but by Kerala flood, we have streamlined it by training more than 200 people. So they are all my engineers, doctors, paramedics, across all departments. There are more than 200 people. Those were trained disaster certified managers across different locations. And disaster has been taken off as one of the CSR measures for last 3 years in SEC. And we had our own standard operating procedure, where to and how to. But those were mostly with respect to flood and drought, all kind of things. We started with Kerala, then we went to Fani, then to Bihar. But this kind of pandemic we have never envisaged, and our design process were not up to mark to that level. So when you work from home, and then also we are to, reaching out. A good thing was that we had our 27 different NGO partners across 19 different locations, pan-India in 11 states, and we were working with them. And in 7 states, we had our ready-made processes. Relief kits were readily available along with food, which used to get replenished every 3 months. And that preparedness was there with us. And that has enabled ACC to reach out to our people by 27th of Jan. 27th of Jan, practically we're on the field and started working along with our 27 esteemed NGO partners. And today I must tell you very proudly, not a single rupee from our side has gone to any of the relief fund, but we have 27 NGO, local NGO partners. Plus we also have a signed agreement with organizations like Gunj for Delhi, Praja Foundation and Roti Bank in Bombay. This was an exclusive agreement with them with respect to provisioning of food, ration, cooked food, both way, but only for big cities where thousands of migrants were there. And the work was for 1 month, 30 days of grocery as a ration at a stretch. And we have reached out to more than 35,000 families in both the cities as of now. In addition to that, at our location, the host, we had our own factory set up. ACC Trust has its own offices across those locations. So we immediately rushed down to district administration and started with 2 things. Number 1, disinfection of the area, because as an industry, we had our own equipments available in-house, which used to do for our plant periphery. The chemicals were borrowed from the government, and the same vehicles were deployed across all locations. And all the hotspots of the district headquarters in the peripheral village were sanitized. And that is, we are doing it every 6 to 7 days for all those locations. Second, we are working with almost 25,000 women groups, SAGs. And through them, we had our own Disha centers, training centers, where we had our own industrial teaching centers. The moment the center were supposed to be closed by district administration, we shifted 5 to 10 industrial stitching machines from the center to some of our SAG members' houses. So that by maintaining a social distance, they started stitching the masks, pure cloth masks. We have started, and by this time, we have already close to 2 lakhs masks across these 19 locations. That is being prepared, given to government, given to local periphery, and the people those who are exposed to common facilities center kind of things. So this, we have focused on these 2 areas. Then subsequently we realized that in our host district, there are a lot of migrant population, those who are stranded in those areas. So with the listing of the administration, we started reaching out to them. So today at Wadi, more than 500 laborers from Jharkhand and Bihar, they were all lying inside very close to border of Telangana and Karnataka. So we shifted back to our own colony site where our space is there to keep our contractual employees. Those are all back end. So these people are staying there when we're taking care of them. We have helped them to get registered and getting all those facilities along with some of their sample swab tests. So this is how we have closely as worked with our own 27 NGO partners. Also signed 3 new NGO partners for a bigger scale in Bombay and Delhi. for migrant workers, especially with Gunj, Praja, and Roti Bank. And in this process, our own sister organization, Ambuja Cement, also joined. For these three partners, it has been joined jointly by ACC and Ambuja. And the work is still on. Every day, there is a dashboard reporting that we're maintaining online, on which by 6 p.m. the reports are being ready. So by this time, all our locations, in those locations, more than 1 lakh people, we are providing them groceries and food in 19 rural and tier 2, 3 cities locations, in addition to what we are doing in the 2 major cities. Going ahead, probably we need to relook at how the way we used to do our regular CSR work and focus towards the digitalization of all our work will be given more emphasis, which already we are doing it. But still we have to ramp up on those lines for the rest of it. Over to you.
For you to give us a short introduction of yourself. So we want to know you, and we also want to know what are the CSR programs that ACC Limited does. So to give everybody context of, what are the kind of interventions that you do, etc. So, I refrained from introducing you. I would like you to please, give a short introduction of yourself, and also give some context of the CSR programs that ACC Limited is.
Yeah, I'm Pratyush Panda, basically from a state like Orissa. I've studied partly at JNU, then in XIMB, did my MBA Rural Management. Started my career from 96, 97 onwards. 10 donkey years I worked with the CARE as international agencies, where I have funded more than 200 NGOs. Mostly on South Asia, had a very good rapport both at bureaucracy level from that day till today, and also had good relationship with the NGO world together. So I always try to bridge gap between all the three players, corporate, the bureaucracy, and the government, and find out the best solution for the communities. That's the way I work. And secondly, I have no my personal NGOs, but personally I keep on doing something with any kind of disaster specialties. So now also I'm doing something out of my own personal passion. You can follow me on Twitter. A lot has been done in Bombay, across mostly for Eastern India migrants. And a lot of people like me have joined together with all our personal capacity. We're doing beyond our regular CSR programming. Coming back to ACC CSR programming, we focus mostly on 3 things based on that, which is designed based on our need assessment studies are the sustainable livelihood in those areas. So in livelihood, we talk about youth, women, and farmers, followed with quality of education, which is purely like a digitalization of the education in our host communities area. And then followed with water, sanitation, health, hygiene kind of thing. This just before pandemic, we have started malnutrition program pan India in 19 locations. The moment it started, it came to a halt because of the lockdown, and again have to revamp it once the lockdown is over and are on those locations.
Great. Thank you so much, Pratyush. I move on now to Ishtiaq. Ishtiaq, it's the same question for you. If you can briefly give an introduction of yourself and also of, the CSR programs of Coke, and also give some idea as to how, as a company, you have responded, to the COVID pandemic.
Great. Happy to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Ishtiaq Amjad. I know the default setting after Ishtiaq is often Ahmed, so many people actually call me Ahmed, but I am Ishtiaq Amjad. I am so I lead the public affairs, communications, and sustainability for Coca-Cola for India and Southwest Asia. We have the concept of business unit, which is essentially a certain region of business that comes together as a business unit. So this is called the India and Southwest Asia Business Unit. We have got, in addition to India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Bhutan. There's another 5 countries which we all handle. I've had probably one of the most weird career path. I'm an economics graduate and then landed up in the armed forces. I've been a tank man. for a few years. After that, I came back to the civil world and tried my hand very unsuccessfully, rather, to be an entrepreneur. Failed miserably. And that's when I realized that I need to work for somebody rather than having somebody to work for me. And started my career with a cosmetic company called Reflame, and then to a couple of Indian groups, SR and SCL. And then I worked for Cargill, which is the American food company, for almost 8 years, both in India. And then I moved to Singapore, and I came back to join Coca-Cola here almost 5 years back in 2015. Coca-Cola, as you know, is world's largest beverage company. We are more than a beverage company in many ways. We are a company of happiness, company of moments, company of optimism, a company that has more than 500 different brands. We have close to about 2 billion serving every day. We are present in every possible country in the world except for 2. And there's no reward for guessing. It is North Korea and Cuba. So we have more presence in the world than the United Nations, just to give you a perspective. In India and Southwest Asia, we have over 58 plants. Let me just focus more on India. We've got 54 plants here. We employ as a system close to about 25,000 people. We've got 14 bottling partners. And the reason why I'm talking about the system is because it will give you a perspective of how we do our sustainability and CSR. So if you really think of us as a company, while the most loved brand Coca-Cola stands out, in addition to that, we've got about 20 brands which are over $1 billion revenue globally. And one of the brand which is getting very close to this is the proud Indian brand called Thums Up, which is very close to becoming $1 billion brand, on its own. Our value chain is very large, so we start right from the farmers for ingredients and go up to the last mile of the retailer. And some of our retailers are as small as, if you walk on the streets of Calcutta, you will find that there are retail shops which are nothing but just one Coca-Cola fridge. And that is the shop of a shop owner. And he or she makes the entire living out of that fridge of Coca-Cola. So we are very proud of the fact that we have a very long value chain, and we really make a difference across the entire value chain. Because we are a beverage company, and because we are a company that believes in satiating the very basic need of beverages and hydration of people, we believe that we need to do things which are very close and associated with our businesses. And what it means for us, because we are a beverage company, the biggest ingredient for us is water. And because water is the biggest ingredient, we work a lot in the area of water. We also provide most of our beverages in a packaged form. So therefore, sustainable packaging is a very, very important aspect of our CSR and sustainability initiatives. As I said that, if I typically ask any audience that how do you really see Coca-Cola as a company, they'll say that we're a soft drink company because Coca-Cola is a very big name. But think of us, almost every beverage of ours, except for the packaged drinking water, has some agricultural ingredient into it. It will either have sugar, maybe stevia, or plenty of fruits in a whole lot of these food, or dairy, or coffee, or tea. Any beverage that you can think of has an agriculture component. So the third important area where we really focus and concentrate on what is about making agriculture more profitable, more sustainable, and more viable. And especially in countries like India, where the farm sizes are very small and smallholding farmers really need that kind of a support. As far as COVID-19 is concerned, this is an unprecedented challenge that all of us have been really thrown into, right? If you look at the journey of COVID-19 thus far and what probably lies ahead of us, it started with a denial. We knew that this was confined to one province of China, Hubei province in Wuhan, and we thought that it will probably get contained there. So there was a denial in the rest of the world. Then it started to move outside of China and moved into a few other countries, Italy and a couple of other Western world. We still lived in denial. The next reaction to that was that of a shock. The entire world really saw that this is, I think it was 15th of March, around that time when the WHO really went on to call it a pandemic, a global pandemic. That's when the world realized that the severity and the permeability and the expanse of this challenge. So the second response to this was of a shock and, coming close and, confining yourself and trying not to go out and lockdowns and all of that. I think we are getting towards the end of that phase. Then we will get into something which is to really, when this pandemic will go up and down, there'll be more infections, there'll be more reactions to that, and then we'll probably start embracing the new normal. So our response to this pandemic has also been in a similar fashion. We realized that this is just too big a scale for anybody to really react to it, and therefore you need more innovative ways of reacting to it. CSR and sustainability budgets will always be a very very limited budget for any company, because that's not the core of your business. So one of the first reactions that Coca-Cola did is that we decided to go dark in terms of our advertisement. We are a brand and marketing company. We're one of the best brand and marketing companies in the world. So we decided to go dark in advertisement and brand communication, which means that we just took off all our advertisement funds and all our advertisement money, because we knew that the consumer sentiments doesn't need to be addressed at this point in time. We repurposed that money in many ways to start deploying the same money in the community engagement. So if you take the example of India, for example, India, we committed 100 crores. Now, 100 crores is not the CSR money that we would probably make out of Indian operation. It's not of that magnitude. The reason we could do that is because we have repurposed a lot of our advertisement money. So in COVID-19 response, essentially we've done three things. One, we've provided a lot of beverage support, because we genuinely believe that beverages and hydrations are very basic needs of people, which is very, very important, especially people who are going through migration, people who are stuck up all across the country. They needed to drink beverages. So we provided extensive support of that. Over and above that, we have started feeding a lot of people at the bottom of the pyramid. A lot of people who are part of our own ecosystem. For example, as I said, sustainable packaging. There are so many rat pickers at the bottom of the pyramid who are absolutely nothing to look forward to. And therefore, all those people needed support. So we've started to feed them. So today, we are feeding close to almost 1 million people through this program of either beverage support or feeding. And then, of course, all of us realize that there is a dire need of PPEs for our frontline warriors. There's a significant amount of contribution we have made through our partner United Ways across India to provide PPEs to the frontline warriors. So in terms of our regular CSR and sustainability perspective, water, sustainable packaging, and agriculture are three focus program that remains where it is. And from a COVID response perspective, we've committed 100 crores, and we're going ahead with the three interventions: beverage support, feeding, and PPE. So I'll stop here. Over to you, Rohit.
Thanks so much, Ishtiaq. I think a very, very interesting concept of stopping marketing, during this pandemic phase, and then using the market or marketing budget, to allocate money for COVID response. So I think something very, very interesting there. So I basically now move on with, the set of questions till Dhruvi joins in. And Pratyush, really one thing which I'd like to ask you is that the pandemic has reiterated the need to nurture local NGOs. And NGOs and community organizations have actually been some of the first responders, to this pandemic. And I think going forward, we would need to empower them and empower local infrastructure and institutions. So can you elaborate this in the context of your COVID response? And how do you see your CSR programs now maybe giving higher weightage to this element going forward?
So yes, Rohit, you know, when 5 years down the line, when our NGO partners used to provide them some additional capacity building support, which was not like normal course of action for them for all through last 2-3 decades, they used to call it, it's like corporatization of the NGOs. One of the example was when you used to teach them how to go digital for all those programming. So, you know, this was not initially being seen as a great need that time. But slowly the NGOs partners like at ACC Trust will normally take partnership on minimum 3 years of MOU kind of thing. And we started building their capacity in a different line, which includes digitalizations, and help them to understand how, you know, they can design their project, they can do need assessment on a tablet, on a piece of phone with an app, and then can design a project and submit to us also. All those things is possible digitally also. It was very difficult for them to get accepted first. But sooner or later, they all have come to the board and got aligned with us. And those who have started is with much agility, they are now the high impactful NGOs in the field, wherever they are, not necessarily with us. Any NGOs, those are digitally sound ground, whether they are working on Aadhaar-based, you know, payment system through banking institution, whether they are doing digital education, even the schools are off, they are teaching their student through digital apps and all. Even if their farmers are on the field and they are far away, with small app, they are supporting their farmers, what to do, what's the price today, and what is the time that they'll get onset on the next Kharif monsoon. Those are the first moving NGO partners on the ground. So one good thing is the faster we go digitally aligned, so our agility, and the corporate's job is also to build up the capacity of their own NGO partners on those lines, so that faster they move to a different, the new life of handling community, the development, and ground zero. So that's one thing where the corporate need to spend a bit of extra money for the capacity building of the NGO partners. And second, with this pandemic, we also need to have a reflection and go through the re-reflecting the need as well studies that was there with us till Feb 2020. Again, has to be really looked at along with the community and come out with a new master plan. What was top priority on December, January, and Feb is not the top priority for the same community, same village, and the same set of people. So that need to revisit faster. And the faster we do, we'll align accordingly the budget coming, whether from the philanthropic or the CSR side, from all corners. So this is where I found that NGOs partners has a great role to play. Faster they to show their agility to digitalization, and also come back to the corporate and all the funders by tweaking that what this is the roles are on the needs and the community has been changed in this shape, and this is what supposed to be done. Because now that look, this almost people are saying that 15 to 20 crores migrants are on road. They're all going towards their home in India, and they are all agri-surplus laborers. That's the reason they have left their village and they came to Bombay, Delhi, Chennai, Coimbatore, Bangalore, Hyderabad. They were agri-surplus in their own villages. That's the reason they are here. Now once they go back, the pandemic issues, contamination, that's different. That's already government handling in a quarantine center facilities. But the moment they'll go back, where they'll get the job? They were here, they were earning and sending money home. Now the agri-surplus will not get a job. But there is a good season in our hand today. The Kharif is about to start. There is a good program with government, which was started during API 2 Manrega. If those things can be activated with government process, either through advocacy of the NGOs or joint advocacy with the corporate, if these two things can be, start working in the field faster, this migrant, those are going back, will get some job at the same time. Some kind of rural infrastructure can be created at that level. And there I found that our local NGO partners, those are grassroots level people, they have a very big and very challenging role to play. Over to you, Rohit.
Great, Pratyush. That was a very interesting insight on how one can actually build on the existing partnership, with NGOs. And I think it would be very reassuring to many of the NGOs. I think, one of the questions that we had, which was, making, or people were asking would be, what would be the role of NGOs, etc. Many of them are, actually going through certain anxieties and financial distress as well. So thank you so much for that, Pratyush. Dhruvi, I think you logged out for a bit, and thank you for joining back in. So it would be great, Dhruvi, if you can give a short introduction about yourself. Give us some context of the wonderful CSR work that Axis Bank is doing, along with the Axis Bank Foundation, and also give us some view on, as a bank and as a foundation, what has been your immediate response to COVID-19?
Yeah. Thank you, Rohit. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dhruvi. I work with Axis Bank Foundation. I look at the programs of the foundation. The foundation, as some of you would know, we work on promoting livelihoods, primarily for the rural communities, and a skilling program for the youth and women and people with disability. We started this program in 2011 with the understanding that if you have to improve the lives and livelihood of people, you need to work on their economic well-being, and that's how the livelihood program was designed. We work on scale, and by scale I mean two things. We work with a large number of people, and we work for a long period of time, enabling people to bring in sustainability to the value chains in which they are entrenched in the rural areas. Look at building community institutions which become sort of anchors in their own areas, supporting farmer-producer organization which enable market access and access to finance. So this is how we work. We are currently working towards supporting 2 million families by 2025. For now, as of now, we are working with about 7 lakh families across the country. Coming to COVID, what I would, so it hit us suddenly, and COVID has been a great equalizer. I mean, all of us have been impacted, unlike most disasters in the past, which are geographically confined. COVID has kind of brought us, all of us together into it. Different people have been affected in different manners. Obviously, people at the bottom of the pyramid who anyway have very, very little security, are barely able to meet their daily requirement, have been most affected. We all know about it. What we have done as a quick response towards relief, I would like to differentiate between what we do as relief and what we should be doing and would be doing as part of recovery and resilience later. So as part of relief, we tried to meet the immediate requirement, which was very different from places to places. So in the cities, it was the sudden lockdown led to loss of livelihood for daily wages, which led to loss of income and food security. So the evident and the most important response there was providing food, very similar to what my two other panelists have said. We very quickly partnered with I think about 7 to 10 organizations in the cities, supported about 30,000 families with dry ration for a month. We would see how do we continue. I think a different kind of, the situation is so evolving that you can't really create a program out of it right now. You need to be able to, you need to have that agility within yourself and your programs right now to meet what is required. Coming to the rural areas, We are working in about 20 states with a network of 23 partners. Every district and every block had a different requirement. Somewhere it was the rural families still had food, right? They had their rations, they grow their food. So they obviously had food, not all, but yes. There was Rabi crop which had to be dealt with the markets closed. There were migrants which were coming back, so you had to set up quarantine centers. But most important amongst everything that was required was creating awareness on the COVID, creating awareness on the impact it will have on people. And all of this had to be done while maintaining social distance. So, innovation kind of works very well in our country, and you see such amazing examples of things happening. So, the community resource people who are part of our projects, they are people from the village who have over a period of time taken leadership role, really came, as frontline workers, took on the role of playing the key person in their village, transmitted information. Mobile networks were extremely useful. What we did is we created, our NGO partners created a lot of audio visual messaging, which was spread through this network, which played a very big role in creating the awareness in the first place. The second part was also aligning them to the PDS, which provided rations. The third was trying to see if the Rabi crop can be saved, secured, and put to market. So you are at least securing them for future cash incomes that will come. With the migrant population coming back, some of them had money, some of them didn't have money. You had to have quarantine centers. So our partners worked very closely with the district administration to see what was locally required and then support accordingly. In a lot of places, quarantine centers were set up very quickly with beds and drinking water and food, sanitizations, and kind of educate people to stay there for some time before they go back to the village. I think this need is going to go up because you have more people coming back to the village. The second thing was obviously providing food for people. So people who typically are landless, are dependent on wage labor, were the first impacted people. So a lot of dry rations was provided to them. What we saw is that a lot of local support was also forthcoming from local SCGs. People who had stored grains with them were willing to share it with the other villagers. A lot of solidarity was observed from the villages. We would continue, our programs are agile. We are agile to meet the needs of the community. And as we go from here, I think it's important to align with all the other stakeholders that are there to ensure that the money is put to as efficient use as much as possible, which means avoid duplication, alignment with the government, see that the money is spent for economic gains for somebody in a particular value chain. And from here onwards, I think that is how we will respond. Our livelihood program is going to support the next level of challenges that we feel the farmers and the non-people with no farm, landless will face. So the next priority is going to be to see how the Kharif season is successful, shift people from let's say cotton to, let's say, wheat or rice or whatever is possible in that area. So to ensure food security for people. The farmers are the producers of what we today understand as the essential commodity. We always knew it, we never acknowledged. There are, I am sure, the support that will be announced by the government is going to be conducive. The CSR money has to act as a catalyzer to leverage funds from the government and make use of those opportunities that are made possible for economic development of people. There is a lot of migration which is happening. There's a lot of in-migration which is happening. We'll have to see how to deal with it. It's too early to say what will happen. But yes, we know that we will be looking at the situation and doing what is required to be done. Yeah, thank you, Rohit.
Great, Dhruvi. That was so wonderful, and I think what is actually coming out, from Pratyush and your response as well is that there is a lot that will actually come in from the communities themselves, and from the NGOs themselves needs up, and it is important, for corporates in this dynamic environment to continue to innovate and to listen to the actual needs, bottoms up, and perhaps the need assessments done, etc., in the past would continuously need to be actually changed, and it's great that corporates and the panelists are recognizing that fact. I'd just like to move a little bit about where all of this is actually going to go. I know it's like uncertain time, and I know we are not astrologists and we can't really predict, but it would be nice to now kind of shift a little bit into what potentially could the future look like. And my next question is to Ishtiaq. Ishtiaq, what from a strategic perspective, what do you think now is going to be the top few greatest challenges, and on the other hand, top few greatest opportunities for corporates and corporate foundations, not only in India, but from a global view, since you're a global company and you have a global role. You can focus on a top few of each, but it'll be interesting to know that, how are boardrooms and how are people viewing the CSR agenda and the sustainability agenda going forward.
Thank you, Rohit. So, yes, nobody knows what is there in store for us, as you've said, but there are a few things for which the indications are very clear. One, if you look at, as I said, that there were different phases of COVID-19, we have seen some of the early recoveries in countries like China and part of Southeast Asia, South Korea, and some of those countries where the pandemic actually has hit earlier, and then they've been through their own journey of flattening the curve and controlling it to whatever extent they can and bringing the new normal. It is a debate that most of the economists are really indulging themselves or hazarding their guess that is it going to be a V-shaped recovery or a U-shaped recovery or a W-shaped recovery or an L, whatever. There are a few things which is really very, very critical. One is the immediate need. So the response to the COVID-19, there's a lot of these immediate need response that have happened. PPEs are typically an immediate need response. And until we have a solution or a remedy or a vaccination or a herd immunity or whatever is the way forward, until we accomplish that immediate need remains. And therefore, all these feeding of people who are at the bottom of the pyramid and being pushed into the vicious circle of poverty, they need immediate response, and that continues to stay there. But what is bigger issue is that if you look at the entire value chain of any company, for example, I keep talking about Coca-Cola. If you look at our value chain, we are as strong as our weakest link in the chain. And the weakest link could be a very small holding farmer who provides fruits to our processing. Or it could be, as I gave you the example of a retail outlet, which is nothing but just one asset that is provided by the Coca-Cola. These are some of the weaker links of our chain. And therefore, we will have to find an innovative way to make sure that they continue to survive. This is a conversation across different industries that is going on. The larger organization, especially those who are good in terms of their cash flow, with their liquidity, and they're managing their debt reasonably well, will probably be able to survive this pandemic better. But then for every one big company, there are a number of ancillaries. There are a number of smaller companies, there are a number of MSMEs, and there are a number of people who are at the cusp of what we call the bottom of the pyramid. So there are a few things that we are really working very hard. One is to provide a business solution to all of this. We will be able to take care of the entire ecosystem if we do better as a business. That's a fact, right? So we are trying very hard to sell that extra case of water or a case of our beverage to make sure that we come back to as close to our base as possible, so that at least while the entire value chain is not making money and they're not profitable, at least they have enough money to survive, so that nobody loses the job, nobody wraps up the operation, nobody gets out of business. That's an important piece. The second important piece is actually very interesting, because in 2016, when demonetization happened, we realized that in our entire, the way we conduct our business, we touch close to about 2.8 to about 3 million retail outlets. And some of them, as I told you, was as small as just one asset provided by the Coca-Cola. They did not know how to do digital transactions at that point in time when the demonetization happened. We actually worked with the biggest bank in India, the State Bank of India, and we rolled out a program which actually went and supported the last mile of transaction through digital payments. So that has come very handy in now, right, in situations like this. So access to credit, we are very happy to hear this entire new stimulus package that the Prime Minister announced yesterday. The Finance Minister, as we speak, is giving the details of that. These are the kind of stimulus which probably is needed to those people to create demand and to really give them the flexibility and the liquidity and the cash flow that is needed the most. So that's another piece of information that is, another piece of work that is really needed at this point in time. Third important thing is that when you come back and you start building your businesses, you realize that you need to declutter your business. Consumer typically go back to the brands and the products that they like and they need the most. So if it's about 30 to 40% of the small retails are operational today. There are a number of them which are not. There are very limited stocks. There's a limited constrained supply chain. There's a constrained distribution system. How do you make sure that you get the best out of it, as we do right now, and how do we do it as we go forward? So these are some of those interventions that we are making at this point in time. Of course, the larger commitment, the commitment around water, the commitment around sustainable packaging, commitment around agriculture will continue to stay there, because that is where we really build our business brick by brick over time. So back to you, Rohit.
So Dhruvi, I mean, we now kind of move to the thematic section,
sure,
of the chat, and I just wanted to pick on, on the specific themes, that you have been working on, and that's livelihood. And one of the, the burning topics today is really the migrant laborers, and we see their plight, and we will see a stress both on the village economy, the rural economy, and we will see a similar stress on the urban economy. There will be migration, there will be reverse migration, etc. So how do you foresee, the fantastic work that you're doing in livelihoods, in the 20 states that you mentioned? How do you see those programs really, undergoing a change, and have you as a bank, have you thought through, certain interventions or certain ways in which you can innovate to be able to address the livelihood issue that will come up?
Right. So in our attempt to work in livelihoods, one of the issues that we want to tackle is to reduce migration, right? While we generalize migration, there are various kinds of migration. To put it simply, there is an aspirational migration and there is a distress migration. So an aspirational migration is when people go to earn a better living, better opportunities in the city, and distress migration is when I go because I don't have anything in the village. So one of the things that we want to address, or we are addressing through our livelihood program, is to see if we can reduce distress migration. What we have observed over 5-7 years is, if you enhance the basket of livelihood options to a family, the distress migration goes away. It may go down from 7 months to 3 months to 2 months. It doesn't really become zero, but it can move from distress migration to aspirational migration, which means the negotiation powers change in the hands of the person. What we are now observing is that people are coming back, and people don't want to go back, is what we hear. Now, we have different kinds of surveys that some of our partners have done. And while people don't want to go back, they also know they will have to go, because they went because there was no opportunity in the villages to support the livelihood. Until there are very, very drastic policy measures, which may take medium to long term, I don't see suddenly livelihood opportunities going up in the village. You can increase some of it. You can work to an extent, but I don't think it can replace the incomes that are coming to the village on account of what we call as migration income or remittance income. In the short run, what we feel is, to an extent, there could be localized strategies that can be employed to enhance the number of people getting jobs. But can it take care of everybody who is coming in? No, it can't. CSR can't really take care of that. The village can't take care of that, right? There is not enough work, which is why they left in the first place. So I mean, we're going to try and see what all can be done. But can we replace what is there in the city in the village? No, we can't. What can you do in medium to long term? Yes, medium to long term, we need a different kind of investment going into the rural areas to be able to employ people, which is beyond construction and manufacturing. So today, most of the migrants are employed in construction and manufacturing. Can you do that in the villages? Short run, medium run, no. But can you move closer? So for somebody to go from an Orissa to a Bombay, but yes, can I move certain things which are closer to my place of location? So there can be a lot of things, but we need to see what the government is kind of rolling out, because that is going to be your key trigger to see any long-term change. On the other side, can cities survive without the migrant labor? Can the economy reboot itself? That's a question we need to ask. See, right now, all of us are looking for answers, but I think it's important to put forth the right questions to people. Are we really going to be able to live in the cities without what we call as a migrant population in the city? Can a city function? Can a factory function? Can a construction site function? Our economic system is too intervened for it to be broken away without having economic repercussion on a very, very large set of population. So I think more than answers, we need to be asking the right set of questions at this point of time, Rohit. And I don't see us doing that. So I want more questions that collectively then all people can answer.
Absolutely.
So this is,
I thank you so much for that, Dhruvi. So I get the sense that it's probably too early to set and change CSR agendas, right? You could have certain.
You need to know that you will have to change. You need to manage. You need to be ready to be agile. You need to be ready to bring in technology, but you have to still wait and see before you shape up concretely ahead.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So Pratyush, I'd like to talk to you about the theme of education now. Very quickly, it's a flip-flop, in the education space as well. And we know that the ACC has, set up many quality schools for their employees and for their, the communities around their plants, etc. Are you as a company and as a CSR head still in the mode of discovering and wanting to ask questions, etc.? It's going to be very difficult, with technology access issues, with social distancing issues. Have you done something already with your CSR programs in the schools? Is that something which we can see going forward? Or are you also waiting and watching for, what the government will come out with and how the whole thing will unfold? It'll be interesting to hear your view.
So Rohit, we had our own 19 schools across different locations. Most of them are run through DV education groups, and some of them are local school management. And these are all like public schools there. Fortunately, till to end of 2016, all our schools used are with respect to have gone very deeper into digital educations. And we have taken support of a lot of different startup partners. I'd like to highlight some of them, how they're yielding results when schools are closed today. So in Orissa, there is a startup called Aveti Learning. So they reached out to different schools, very small startup, pure Odia content for government schools kind of setup. And they started giving support to different, like us, they're giving their multiple clients. But today they are reaching out to 90,000 students every day during school hours and giving them pre-education based on the government of Orissa curriculum. Second one, I'll talk about the Akshara Foundation, the Ganit Kalika, which they've transformed into a app-based, just Android application-based tool. And it's a free tool. Anybody can download. Even you, me, even my kids have downloaded and going through. And this tool gives you all CBSE-based module mathematics curriculum from like KG to PG kind of thing. Mostly like up to 12 standards. But it's pretty helpful at your home when kids are with a small smartphone worth of maybe 3, 4, 5,000. One can easily go through that app, and it also have offline facilities. And people can learn, can give exam on those lines. But the problem now happening is the exams in most of the Indian schools, whether government, private schools, are all like manual. We have never used to have a digital examination systems. And even if you read hard for entire year, when it comes to exam, it has to be a manual one. So entire, work stuff's there. So from there, you need to depend on government machineries, how we can transform those examination rating system also into a digital system. Otherwise, the whole 364 days will work digitally, but one day to come to the gate of the schools. So that part can also be transformed through government advocacy. I think government is also working on those lines. I got 2 small notes from CBSE headquarters also. After COVID-19, they're also planning on those lines. If that happens to the schools, those who are providing support to underprivileged children across different states of India, like ACC has 90 schools. There are n numbers of schools are there by corporates, by NGOs. Those are purely reaching out to underprivileged population of that area. These things will move forward. Otherwise, somewhere you have to stop. But you are right. Today also it's challenging when our schools are closed. Not everything that can happen. Not all parents can afford even a 3,000 phone. What next for them? Can you have a pool and then have it? Or you can have a village-based education system where kids, instead of coming to school, within the community center in a village, they can have further studies digitally. Those things can be thought of going ahead. Over to you, Rohit.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. I think we have clocked an hour, so I'll end our discussion in terms of
a lot of questions
right now. There have been a lot of questions on chat, and I think we've been responding to some of the questions as these questions come in. There was one question which actually came in in writing to us earlier, and I'd like Ishtiaq to actually answer that question for us. After that, I will we will extend this by maybe another 5 minutes and see if we can take a few more questions. But as far as this question goes, Ishtiaq, it's really, from another CSR head. And there is a curiosity that, unlike, in many cases where the corporates have put in money from marketing budgets, the employees have also volunteered, CSR money has also come in. There are some corporates where, where there were no gaps in the previous years, but a lot of the money has already been spent in the first 1 or 2 months as a response to the phase 1. So there are questions which many corporates have as to what is going to happen to the balance programs and what is the best way to manage your budgetary allocation. So your view there, Ishtiaq, would be useful, and Pratyush and Dhruvi, I think it's a very pertinent question. Yeah. It'll be great if you can also add in after Ishtiaq, and we can then just chat about this a little bit before we take any further questions.
Sure, right.
So Rohit, so a very simple answer to that is: are we not recalibrating our business response to the new challenge? We are. Are we not recalibrating our governance response to the new challenge? We are. Are we not recalibrating the societal response to this new challenge? Of course we are. So CSR is going to be no different. There are business commitments that probably companies and organizations may not be able to meet, and they will have to probably relook at that entire thing and go in a very honest and very methodical and a very deliberate manner to really address that. The same is happening as we see in government, in societies, in all of us, being apart has become being together. None of us had ever thought that we will see a time in our life where, more you stay away from others, more you get closer to them. So I think it will call for a recalibration. What does not change is what is the timeless commitment to the fundamental core of your business. So for Coca-Cola, as I said, that for us, sustainable business operation remains the core of as long as we continue to be in the business. So sustainable solutions for water, for agriculture, for sustainable packaging, all of this remains. Of course, the extent to which we have invested our resources into that may change a little bit. And it's understandable. But I don't think that fundamentally that is going to change.
What are your views? What are your views, Pratyush? And Dhruvi, I would like your views on this as well.
Yeah. So Rohit, I was going through that question. It's a very tough question and also a tough challenge for all the CSR heads and the board as well. So one thing I'll tell you, if you look at current year budget after April, those who have started their financial year, or after Jan, those who have started their financial year. So last 3 years used to be very good year, profitability of the company wise in India. Those who are operating in India, all Indian companies across banking, service sector, manufacturing, everywhere. Precisely what I'm saying, your profitability has gone up. Whereas what you committed to your NGO last year, suppose you committed 10 crores, means this year also to 10 crores. And if your profitability has gone up, the delta is giving you cushion to think agile, think new, and this money you can put wherever you like based on some certain scientific basis, maybe on COVID, maybe on something else. Number one. So there is a cushion for you. Second, when you are planning your CSR budget, again, I'm repeating, if it's 10 crores, you are not planning for 100% from the year beginning. Normally at our end, 90%, 90 to 95% is planned for the regular program. 5 to 10% we keep for any kind of disaster preparedness kind of thing. We don't know which state to hit. In what is flood or drought or something else. But that's kept apart. If those things you have done from the beginning of the year, you have some cushion in your hand, which you can easily tweak when there is certain urgent requirement like current COVID-19 pandemic. And if you have done for planning for 100%, then certainly you have to come back a step. Again, I would take another step forward by rethinking. So that cushion is there. you can easily handle this situation. Post third pointer is when you post COVID-19, where again you are going to your community and rechecking your need of the community, you'll find that priority towards health-related activity goes up with government, with NGOs, and also with community. That again will help you to put more relatively better budget with respect to health-related issues. Over to you, Rohit.
So Dhruvi, what is your view on this? And have you, does the bank have a specific disaster response budget allocated, and were you able to build on this and do your activities out of that budget, and now you need to just recalibrate your balance programs, or is there something else?
So in times like COVID, I think budgets lose, the boundaries are lost, right? Whether it's business money, whether it's thematic money, whether it is CSR money, non-CSR money, I think recalibration is going to happen everywhere. This is an opportunity to make businesses more inclusive, solve the problem by business, and use CSR as and when required. So I think it's a great time for recalibration of the way we do our business. Can we formalize participation of people into the system? Can we have more equitable share of people into the value chains? Those are things which COVID has given as opportunity, and therefore that kind of recalibration it should be done rather than narrowing the focus to CSR ka kya karenge. It's too small a money it's too small a money when we look at the requirement. It is too small a money compared to every other money that is going to be required to bring people out of the situation. Yeah, that's what I would like to kind of say.
Great. So thank you so much. Abhishek, would you like to ask one or two questions which you've compiled from the audience?
Yes.
And then we can actually wrap up the session and then do a summary, because I think there are a lot of questions which have come in. So I over to you for a couple of questions, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. So I'll raise two questions which are quite pertinent and quite relevant, and it's a mix of multiple questions that we have really done. First question is around the decision-making process. So you as the CSR leaders, what data points did you use to come up with a strategy where to put in the money, how to put in the money, and once you decided that, how did you monitor the progress and how did you move further? So what kind of technology or the data points did you really use for your decision-making process? So, I mean, it's open for, for all of you. So either all of you can answer or one or two. So that's absolutely your choice.
Yeah. Can I answer?
Yes,
sure.
Yeah, I think the problem was, the problem was right at the door. So when the problem is at your door, I don't think you can go looking at how will I measure my impact, what are the data points. I think right now what is important is we respond. There are data points, there will be monitoring, all that will happen. But in terms of long-term decision making, we have not reached that stage yet. We might think we have, but we haven't. Right now, we are all responding to relief. Once things settle a bit is when we start planning long-term, is when metrics and things like that will come up. Right now, it's more about meeting that very urgent requirement. Yeah.
Right. Pratyusha, do you want to elaborate a little bit on it? Like, how did you choose the geographies, the areas, the kind of interventions you want to, you plan to go ahead?
Yeah, very pertinent question. Just to elaborate a bit on also with respect to what Dhruvi has covered on pandemic beyond I'm talking about. For regular programming, if you go through the CSR rule book, all the authorities have been given to board and board committee on CSR. So in all companies, board committee, looking at their kitty size and the area of operations they are into, they decide which are the area I'm going to work. I'm talking about, this is one sector of industries. The other sector of industries like banking, service sector, those who have enough CSR money in their hand with respect to 2%, but they don't have periphery to spend. For them, they can go more thematic wise, decide thematically, and then go to the respective location and work on those lines. So this is normally that approach has been taken. And then when people go out to the regular project, they do a lot of need assessment scientific studies across all corporates these days are doing. And based on that, they're reaching out to multiple NGOs of that areas, and then coming down to one specific NGOs by taking bidding, not necessarily on a pencil bidding I'm talking about, with impact indicators biddings as well. And then finalizing one NGOs as a MOU, and they roll out the project. If you look at my organization, ACC, you can go to our ACC Limited or ACC Trust website. There is a 44-page SOP document. It also talks about how NGO is being finalized. So we, based on our need assessment, will share it with at least 10 NGO of that locality, receive that document, do comparative analysis, call at least 5 of them for presentation, then nail down to a single organization, but with a commitment of minimum 3 years from the both side, and we goes on. And the second question with respect to the impact and all those parts, today also you can check, those who are in Bombay can check with this Praja Foundation organization, how every day they are monitoring on an app what is their outreach in entire Mumbai, ward-wise they can give you live digital dynamic update today itself. They have designed it in very quickly with the IT Bombay support, and monitoring those programming on our day-to-day relief work also. Second, anybody come and the police station level can goes down and record their details, and that can be fed out at our end. Okay, here is there are 5 or 10 new cases in Bandra police station or Khar police station or in Chembur Tilak Nagar police station. They need immediate support, and then people can reach out to them. So those things are also be done, but in pandemic and kind of disaster side, that takes a seat back for the timing. First is to address, as Dhruvi was saying, address, and maybe 1 month down the line, 2 months down the line, we can always check back about our impact on disaster related activity.
Yeah. So I think, Abhishek, we will probably need to stop at this one question. I think we're already at almost 5 o'clock.
Sure.
So I'd really like to, thank all the panelists for joining us. It's been a truly engaging discussion. Two things which really, kind of strike me, and I think one was, the fact that there is an opportunity now to integrate CSR with business. And I think, Ishtiaq, this is, moving, very close to the entire sustainability and the entire business space. So I think COVID is an opportunity where it's good for CSR, where you can make it more strategic. And as Dhruvi mentioned, it might not have the budgets on its own, but it has an entire ecosystem which you can now sort of integrate with the business in a better fashion. And the other thing which really struck me was that while we really do not know, how things are going to pan out, we should continue to listen to our NGOs and our communities on ground. And we should continue to keep responding in that way. Impacts, need assessments, etc., data points, those will follow. And definitely there will be an increased need for use of technology and digitalization. So I think that was wonderful inputs from all of you. Thank you so much, and thank you participants for joining in, and we look forward to the next webinar in the series, which will be launched shortly. So thank you so much.